Hey guys, today I am reviewing the Morphe 35O2 Second Nature palette. I have previously reviewed the original Morphe 35O, the large Morphe Jaclyn Hill palette, as well as the Morphe Jaclyn Hill Bling Boss palette, which is the purple palette from her new Vault collection. I will have all of those reviews linked up in the cards. I recommend checking out all of those videos because I've actually had different experiences with each of the palettes, which is kind of interesting. I also have quite a few Morphe brushes in my collection, both eye and face brushes, and I've had zero problems with them. I think that they are actually very good quality for a very affordable price. So from my experience, I would recommend them. I probably wouldn't buy a brush set from them off of Haute Look because those seem like more of the private labeled, really old Morphe brushes. Like, I don't even know if they still sell those on their original website. And whenever I see people talking about Morphe brushes that are falling apart, typically it's those crappy sets. I feel like the new brush sets are probably safe, like any ones that they do in collaboration with the influencer, any of the new ones. Just like the old ones you see on Haute Look, I wouldn't trust those, but in general, I've only gotten individual brushes from them and I think they all work really well. But to get into this palette, I am not going to be holding it up that much throughout the video because the really stark black packaging really F's with my lighting badly, so I'll be inserting some clips of all of the shadows and everything so you can see them close up, but I won't be holding it up because it will mess with the lighting and will drive all of us insane. So I do apologize for that. Unfortunately, I don't have fancy editing where I can do split screen, hopefully in the future. For price and availability, you can find Morphe from their website as well as from Ulta and a few other retailers. I recommend buying all the products you can from Ulta because they have cheaper shipping, they have a better return policy, and some Ulta stores do have Morphe in store so you can actually swatch the products. So that's what I would absolutely recommend. Now, unfortunately, Ulta does not sell all of their products, but they do have a bunch of different palettes and they just started selling their lip products, and they do have a good variety of brushes as well. Again, not everything, probably not even half of the stock, but I would get whatever you can from Ulta. And this palette retails for $23, which I think is fantastic. Even compared to drugstore priced palettes, to have this many shades, that is on par with other brands. NYX has been releasing palettes and charging a lot for them. So this is cheaper or the same price as the NYX palettes, which have a quarter or a third of the amount of shades that this one has. And if you buy it from Ulta, you can use your $3.50 off $15 coupon on this or your 20% off coupon. They just changed up within the past couple months that now you can use coupons on Morphe products. So that's even more of a reason to buy from Ulta. So for the packaging, I think this may have changed since I purchased my palette at the beginning of the year because it comes in that crappy plastic packaging that has a little clasp. There is no mirror in this palette, and it does come with a little sheet with the shade names on it, but I actually just glued, well, I put tape on the little sheet to the top of my palette since there's no mirror. That way it'll be easy for me to see the shade names. So it's not the cutest looking, but it definitely makes this palette more functional for me and easier to talk about in videos this way. So this packaging to me feels incredibly cheap. Also, this being a large palette, it's not something that I pull for as much in my collection because it's just so big and it's not travel friendly in any capacity. Now, they may have changes to the packaging they have for the Jaclyn Hill palettes where it is that sturdy cardboard with a magnetic closure. I feel like they've done it with some palettes. I don't know if they've done it with this palette, but if they have, I think that's definitely an improvement. Now, I know some people do not like that packaging, but for me, I've never had trouble with the magnet opening up or any of my shadows getting damaged. So for me, that's the kind of packaging I prefer. So now comes the portion of the video where I show you guys all of these shades with swatches and include dupe pictures. Well, since Talia has not reviewed this on her blog, so I don't have any specific dupe pictures to share with you guys, but I can guarantee you have dupes for every single shade in this palette with potentially the exception of the shimmery and matte really bright red and orange. Maybe you don't have those. If you have the ColourPop Yes Please palette, you have the matte red and orange, but maybe not the shimmery. So even though I won't be able to show you exact dupes for everything, I guarantee you have them and that they're out there and in most warm neutral palettes. So I am dreading swatching all of these shades, but you guys are worth it for sure. And you guys will see how similar these shades are. It is really outrageous how well they were able to stretch out a couple basic shades to come up with 35. So to show you the palette, it is set up in 5 rows of 7. This first shade is Universal and it is a matte finish. Pure is a metallic finish. Orb is a matte finish. Tan is a matte finish. Sizzle is a metallic finish. Amber is a metallic finish. And Bronzy is a metallic finish. For the second row, Flux is a matte. Contour is a matte. Heat is a matte. Ablaze is a matte. Sauce is a metallic. Fire is a matte. And Ruby is a metallic. Third row in the palette, Zodiac is a metallic. Polished is a metallic. Spice is a matte. Terracotta is a matte. Brick is a matte. Rustic is a metallic. And Zippy is a metallic. For the fourth row in this palette, Dust is a matte. Risky is a matte. Chestnut is a matte. Halo looks shimmery, but when you swatch it out, it really shows up like more of a satin finish shadow. It definitely does not have a foiled finish, and the shimmer is really subtle. Rich is a matte. Brave is a matte. And In the Zone is a matte. For the last row in this palette, Fawn is a matte. Stone is a matte. So Warm is a matte. Toast is a matte. Brunette is a matte. Muddy is a matte. And Whiz is a matte. So this is the first row in the palette. Universal is a matte. Pure is a metallic. Orb is a matte. Tan is a matte. Sizzle is a metallic. Amber is a metallic. And Bronzy is a metallic. So that's the first row. This is the second row in the palette. Flux is a matte. Contour is a matte. Heat is a matte. Ablaze is a matte. Sauce is a metallic. Fire is a matte. And Ruby is a metallic. So this is the second row in the palette. So here is the third row in the palette. Zodiac is a metallic finish. Polished is a metallic finish. Spice is a matte. Terracotta is a matte. Brick is a matte. Rustic is a metallic, and Zippy is a metallic. If any of these swatches are looking patchy, I promise that they don't truly swatch that way. It's because my arm is a little bit wet. These actually all swatch really nicely. And this is the third row in the palette. This is the fourth row in the palette. Dust is a matte. Risky is a matte. Chestnut is a matte. Halo is a satin. This is the one that I said has some shimmer in the pan, but you really can't see it very much even in a swatch, so it is more of a satin finish. Rich is a matte. Brave is a matte. And In the Zone is a matte. So this is the fourth row. So this is the last row in the palette, and they are all mattes. The first shade is Fawn, and I'm really wishing I used this in a look because this color is really pretty and definitely the darkest that I would probably go in the warm tone family, but that's a good one. I need to remember that for future use. Then we have Stone, So Warm, Toast, Brunette, Muddy, and Whiz. So does this last shade Whiz look like a black to you or more like a really deep navy? For me, it looks kind of like a navy shade. Now I'm sure on the eye it will work the same essentially as black, but I just thought that was kind of weird. But these are really all of the deepest shades in the palette and the final row. So I was able to come up with 5 different looks using this palette. I could definitely create probably like 25 looks, but they're going to all be very, very, very similar. I tried my best to make them look different. That's why I only did 5 looks. I tried to show 5 different versatile looks, but most of the looks that someone might create with this palette are going to be very similar. But of course, there are a lot of people who are much more creative than me that can come up with a lot of different looking eye looks with just using this palette. So wanted to put that out there, but I'm just going to show you the details of the 5 looks I created. Here is today's look using my palette of the month. Today's look is a recreation from a Kathleen Lights tutorial. I didn't pull it off quite as well as she did, but I do like the color combination that she chose, so I will have that tutorial linked up in the cards. From the Morphe 35O2 palette, I use Orb as my transition color, Heat as my crease color, Brave as my outer corner color, and Sauce as my lid color. Here are what the eyes look like up close. On my cheeks, I'm wearing Becca Mineral Blush in Songbird. For my lips, I line them with the Tarte Tarteist lip liner in the shade Latergram, which is like a light terracotta color. I forgot to pull it out. But what I'm wearing as my main lip color is the Too Faced Melted Matte Liquid Lipstick in the shade Sellout. Here's today's look using my palette of the month. I recreated a eye tutorial from Sophie Bella. I will have her tutorial linked up in the cards. I added one extra shadow because she's a little bit tanner than me, and I wanted to make sure the look was softened around the edges a bit, but for the rest of the eye look, I did exactly what she did. On the Morphe 35O2 palette, I used Pure on the first 2/3 of my lid and Polished on the outer third of my lid, and I did cut the crease. For my transition color, I used Ablaze, and more concentrated in my crease, I used Fire. I went over top of Fire with a little bit of Chestnut, really defined in the crease, and then I took this shade Orb and went just right around the edges of my transition crease area to lighten the look a bit. Here are what the eyes look like up close. On my cheeks, I'm wearing theBalm Instain Blush in Swiss Dot. On my lips, I'm wearing the Dose of Colors Liquid Lipstick in the shade Truffle. Here is today's look using my palette of the month. As a base on my lid, I'm using the Mally Shadow Stick Extra in Autumn Shimmer. I used Universal as my base transition color. Then I went over top with this shade Tan with a more defining brush to add more intensity. But because I'm so fair, I think it's really good for me to go with Universal first, so my transition color doesn't look too deep. I used Polished as my lid shade, Risky as my crease color, and Chestnut as my outer corner outer crease color. Here are what the eyes look like up close. On my cheeks, I wore the Becca Mineral Blush in Songbird, which I think looks very pretty, but I did do my blush before I chose my eyeshadow, and I actually think that the Clinique Cheek Pop in Ginger Pop would have gone much better with this makeup look if I wanted to go with more of a monochromatic vibe. I think the makeup looks really nice, like rosy, pinky terracotta, and I think this would have gone better, but as I said, the Becca blush still looks nice. On my lips, I'm wearing the ColourPop Lippie Stick in the shade Brink. Here is today's look using my palette of the month. As a base on my lid, I use the Balm Batter Up Shadow Stick in the shade Curveball. Universal is my transition color. Orb is my crease color. Brick is my outer corner color. And Rustic is my lid shade. On my lower lash line, I use the Urban Decay 24/7 liner from the Jean-Michel Basquiat collection in the shade Anatomy, but their permanent shade Torch is very similar. Here are what the eyes look like up close. On my cheeks, I'm wearing Becca's Mineral Blush in Songbird. On my lips, I'm wearing the Dose of Colors Liquid Lipstick in the shade Mondays. Here is today's look using my palette of the month. As a base on my lid, I'm using the theBalm Batter Up Shadow Stick in the shade Curveball. I'm wearing Universal as my really buffed out all over transition color. Then I used Orb, a little bit more concentrated in my transition area. Zodiac as my lid shade. Ablaze is my crease color. And Fire is my outer corner color. Here are what the eyes look like up close. On my cheeks, I'm wearing MAC Mineralized Blush in Warm Soul. On my lips, I'm wearing the Anastasia Liquid Lipstick in Ashton. So now for formula, texture, and pigmentation. Out of all 4 Morphe palettes I've tried, this one is my favorite performance-wise. Now with the big Morphe Jaclyn Hill palette, I didn't find that those shades were incredibly pigmented, and I felt that I had to build them up quite a bit. With the Bling Boss palette, those were really pigmented, fairly easy to work with, but I felt like the shimmer shades, I had to build them up a little bit because they had almost too much dimethicone, and they were a little harder to pick up on a brush. Well, in this palette, both the mattes and the shimmers perform much better than either of the Jaclyn Hill palettes and then the original 35O palette. I didn't like the mattes in there. I didn't think they were that pigmented. I thought they were a little bit patchy. There were 2 really foiled shades in that palette that were really, really intense, and they were almost a little oily. I still really like them because they had so much intense sheen, but they were a little thick and oily. These are better, so I was really happy to see that. So for the mattes, these are really pigmented from the jump. You don't need to sit there and build them, even with the lightest shade, at least on my skin tone, which I greatly appreciate. I will say that you do get quite a bit of kick up in the pan. I do get a tiny bit of fallout on my face with the matte shades, but not that much, but definitely a good bit of kick up. But just make sure you tap off your brush. It really doesn't faze me at all, not a bit, because they are so easy to get full pigment and they actually blend really well. And as you can see today, I used more of an intense shade in my outer corner. It blended so nicely into the other shades, and maybe what makes blending even a little easier is because the shades in this palette are so close to each other, you're able to have that nice gradient effect by using shades that are just 1 or 2 shades lighter. So that might make it a little bit easier, but truly if I use a shade on its own, I do think it blends out pretty nicely. Then for the shimmery shades in this palette, I do think they have a lot of nice metallic sheen. They do have a little bit of that slick dimethicone feeling, but they're not too oily where they feel really thick, and you don't really have to dig in the pan either, because I did have a little bit of those 2 experiences with the really thick, oily Morphe 35O, and then the really smooth but kind of tightly pressed shades in the Bling Boss palette. So this is like the best of both worlds. You have the nice metallic sheen, but it does pick up easily on a brush. It does go over my lid easily, but I did get quite a bit of fallout with the shimmer shades on my lid, so I did want to mention that. I also did apply a cream base under the shades on my lid. I do that with all of my powder shadows. I find that it helps the shadow adhere to my eye and look even more metallic. So I think that helped with these, but I think they truly have a good formula on their own where they're going to stick to the lid and be really shimmery. So formula wise, I was actually really, really impressed with this palette, and I definitely recommend it in that regard. But for me, it's just the colors that flop. Now, I love warm tones. I find it very flattering with my skin tone, eye color, and hair color. But the shades in this palette are so similar. It was not necessary to have all of these. There's no gold in this palette. How could you not put 1 gold? There are some coppers, some bronzes, 1 light warm tone shimmery shade, but there could have been more shimmers in here because there's a lot of really similar mattes and even similar shimmers, considering there's not a ton of shimmers. They could have added some different shades that still go with the tone of the palette, but like they don't have to look exactly the same. But I thought this palette would be even better if they made it like when they collabed with Kathleen Lights a long time ago, and it was a 15 color palette. They had 3 rows of 5, and that was a nice cardboard packaging. You guys know I love. So I thought, okay, if I had to choose 15 shades out of this palette to create a smaller palette, what would they be? So I sat there and did that, and I wanted to share that with you because I personally like it better, and they're the shades that I gravitated towards the most, and I feel like you truly can get the exact same look with this 15 color palette that you could with this 35 color palette. The other shades that I didn't choose are so similar. One might be a little bit lighter, a little bit deeper, so depending on your skin tone, you might switch them out with some other shades, but overall, you're still gonna be able to get almost all the exact same looks with a 15 color palette as you would with this 35 color palette, in my experience. So if I could create my own 15 pan palette out of the 35O2, these would be the shades I would have in my first row. And again, with all these shades I'm going to show you, you might want to choose a lighter or deeper color, especially in the mattes, based on your skin tone. So these might not work for everyone, but this would be my perfect version of a 35O2 palette. So the first shade I would include is Universal. This is the lightest matte shade in the palette. I use this as my transition color for every single eye look. Now, if you have a more tan complexion than me, you might like this to set your primer, or you might want a slightly deeper shadow to work for your transition shade. The next one here is the lightest shimmer in the palette. It is called Pure. This is a really nice, light, warm, golden champagne shade. The next shade here is Orb. This is really the second lightest warm tone matte in the palette. Now, depending on your skin tone, this might be your perfect transition shade, but for me, this is really great in the crease. This shade right here is Zodiac. It is a really metallic coppery bronze. Now I'm about to show you in a second. There are 3 shades in this palette that are very, very similar. One a little lighter, one a little darker, and this one's in the middle, which is why I chose this shade. And then the last shade here is Brick, which is this really beautiful, deep, orangey brown color. And this is my perfect outer corner color, but of course, depending on your skin tone, this might work well as a crease. So this would be my first row here because we've got 2 shimmers and 3 mattes. So right here, I wanted to show you some comparison swatches between Zodiac in the middle and then one lighter, one darker. This one right here is called Bronzy and this one is called Zippy. So as you can see, they're all super duper similar. So you don't need all 3 in this big palette. You could totally get the same effect just by having one of these 3. And like I said, I did choose Zodiac because it's right in the middle. So for my second row in the palette, I kept all 5 of the really bright orangey red shades. We have 2 shimmers and 3 mattes here. These are the most unique shades in the palette. These are the ones that stand out to you. So I felt like to really keep the essence of this palette, you needed to keep all 5 of these shades. This burnt orangey red shade is called Heat. This slightly burnt bright orange is called Ablaze. This really shimmery orange is called Sauce. The really bright matte red is called Fire, and the shimmery red on the end is called Ruby. But I did want to show some options in case these 2 shimmers were a little intense for you. I don't necessarily love this shimmer. It doesn't look that shimmery on the eye. I feel like in the swatch, these 2 look really similar in finish. In person, I can tell the difference, but I feel like in a swatch, these are really similar. So I don't know if you need both of them. It depends if you would like these shades on your lid or not. For me, these are much easier to wear in the crease. So I wanted to show some other alternatives I thought would go nicely with this row. So the 2 other alternative shades I have would be Amber, which gives you that like NARS Orgasm vibe much deeper. It's like you have like a more like red coral base with a golden sheen, which I thought was really pretty. And then you have this shade Rustic here, which is more of like a true orangey copper. The Zodiac shade I showed before is more of a coppery bronze, and this one has a little bit more orange in it. So again, if you don't think you would get the most use out of these 2 here, those might be some nice shimmers. And I actually would probably get more use out of these 2 than those 2, but I love those 3 matte shades a lot. So that would be my second row in the palette with a couple of variations. My last row in the palette is using the more mauve pink undertone shades in this palette. So as you can see, these are all pretty similar. It's more of a monochromatic look, which I tend to really go for, but I wanted to try to capture like the 3 different color families in this palette. Some more lighter warm neutrals, the really bright orange and reds in this palette, and then these more mauve tone shades. Those are the real 3 color families in here. I wanted to try to capture them all within my perfect 15 color palette. So I have 1 shimmer here, which is Polish. Then I have 4 mattes going from light to dark. I do have a little variations for these depending on your preference. So this lightest matte here would be Risky. The next one I have is Terracotta, which does have more of that pinky undertone, but this one is a little bit more warm compared to these others, and it is more brown. This one right here is called Chestnut, and this final one here is called Brave, which is a little more purple, and this one is a little more red. So out of this row here, if I had to make a replacement, I would probably replace Brunette personally because that one is a little bit more orangey tone. But if you would rather replace one of these shades to have a deeper color here, something that I think would go nicely is this shade Brunette. It is still a little bit more purpley, more mauve-y, but this is a deeper color to help define the outer corner. So some of this variation would be my last row in the palette. So to give you guys my final thoughts on this palette, really happy with the formula. If you like really warm tone shades, I would say go for it. I think that considering they have so many colors, it would have been nice if they added in maybe a light shimmer for a brow bone or inner corner highlight. I don't do that, a lot of people do. Or if you had a light matte cream color to set the primer, and you had a true matte black. You guys know I don't use matte black, but a lot of people do. And this one really looks like a navy when you swatch it out, which is weird because that doesn't really go with the other things in this palette. Like, yes, navy and like orange go together. but it just was weird. It seemed like a true black would be better for this palette. So considering there was so many shades that similar, if you have 35 colors, I think you could have thrown those little ones in. I think people would be more happy, feel like it was a full, complete palette if you had those couple shades. I love this quality-wise, but I honestly don't know how much I'll be pulling for it because I think that all the looks I created here, I can get from several of the other warm tone palettes I have in my collection. Part of me regrets buying this for the fact that I don't think I'm going to get the proper use out of it. Now, I did buy this with a 20% off coupon, so it was even more affordable. It's a good quality palette. I might declutter it to someone in the future, but it's not bad. I just don't love all the colors they put in it because they are the exact same. I wish this was a smaller palette where they added in some pops of color, like shimmery blues would be really pretty with this, or if you did have some golds, like they could have just added more in here, and I think they just took a couple basic colors and stretched them out way too much. So guys, those are my thoughts on the Morphe 35O2 Second Nature palette. I would love to know your thoughts if you tried this palette in the comments down below, and I would love to know your experience with other Morphe palettes that you've tried and other Morphe brushes that you've tried, what your experiences are, and which brushes you would recommend. They have so many individual brushes, and I'm wanting to get a couple more, but it's kind of hard to tell the differences online, and I would just love to know your all's thoughts. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye guys.